Hello, everyone. Welcome. Good afternoon. My name is Bill Silva. I'm the Associate Executive Director at the Connecticut Association of Schools, and I want to thank you for joining us for today's CAS workshop on self-care and wellness for school administrators, presented by Dr. Lata McGinn. So this is a very timely presentation, and I appreciate that you folks are taking the time out of your day to be here, but I know this is going to be valuable and helpful for all of you. Before I introduce Dr. McGinn, I want to thank CAS's corporate partners, the Connecticut Army National Guard, Liberty Bank, Horace Mann, Jostens, and Pullman and Cumley for their ongoing support of CAS's high-quality professional development for school leaders and all educators in Connecticut. I also want to go over how we'll proceed today. So we're doing this in the Zoom meeting format. We usually do the webinar format, but we wanted to make this a little bit more informal and interactive. So we're doing it in the Zoom meeting format, but to make it manageable, I ask if you can at least initially mute yourself during Dr. McGinn's presentation. And if you can use the chat feature or the hand raising feature, and that way we can, when we get to the more interactive portion, that way we can try and manage that piece a little bit better. And I promise that Dr. McGinn will address as many questions as she can during the presentation for the hour and a half that we're here together today. And we also are recording the session, and we will make that available as soon as we have it ready. So, and we'll send you a notification when that is ready. So let me introduce our presenter. Dr. Lata McGinn is a licensed clinical psychologist. She is a tenured professor of psychology at the Furkhoff Graduate School of Psychology at Yeshiva University and the Albert Einstein College of Medicine. Dr. McGinn, just admitting people, Dr. McGinn is also co-founder of Cognitive Behavioral Consultants, an evidence-based clinical practice and training center in Manhattan and White Plains, New York. Dr. McGinn received her PhD in clinical psychology from Fordham University. There's a much longer biography of Dr. McGinn that I could go through, but I don't want to take up the time from her presentation. She's been with us before, as have others of her colleagues from CBC, and we're really grateful for the collaboration that we've established. And I'm going to turn it over right now to Dr. McGinn, and welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for inviting me again to all of you at CAS. I appreciate being here, and I know how many Zoom meetings everybody is in, so I appreciate you being here today. And you know, it's the Zoom meeting function actually helps, I think, for the presenter anyway. So it feels like I'm actually in the room with you. So I like looking at faces so that I feel like, okay, we're in person, there's people here. The webinar function can sometimes be, you know, you're away. So if you are open to having your video on and muting yourself, that would certainly help, but obviously that's your choice. So thank you for being here, and I'll start by sharing my slides. And in you know, it's about an hour and a half altogether, I guess a little less now, but there will be a worksheet I'll send out by chat so that if you know, that way we can make it as applied as possible. And so that it's not just a lecture that you're attending, and obviously it's your choice to participate in it, but I hope that you will. So I'm going to share my screen now. All right, so here is the beginning of my slides. It's really about self-care and wellness for administrators, and I count myself in this illustrious group. It's a tough time to be an administrator. And I think that certainly school administrators have always faced myriad stressors, you know, as you manage and balance the needs of the administration, teachers, students, etc. You know, the COVID-19 pandemic has really impacted all of our lives in that word, you know, unprecedented, that everybody has used in ways that has heightened the stress and burnout, I think, that administrators face today. And although stress can be normal and everyone experiences stress from time to time, chronic stress and burnout can be harmful to our health and impede our ability to function. So I guess the goal is to have this workshop, help with some self-care and wellness for all of you. And it's certainly something that I know that I find useful for myself. So I'll start with that. And uh, the workshop, the talk today is kind of organized into three sections. The first is I'll talk about the context that we're facing today, the consequences of those, and then how we can all, cope in this context. So in terms of the context, obviously you guys all are aware, but of COVID, but I'm going to step back a little bit. And that pre-COVID, our lives have been, even before this pandemic, transformed really in the 21st century. And even more so over the last 10, 15 years. We've been leading far busier lives, fast-paced lives at home, at work, lots of pressures, dangers like climate change, school shootings, lots of things. And in general, the social support is less than it used to be. And we know that research shows that social support is protective against stress. The past 10 years, there's been an increasing recognition of stress and anxiety and depression and the impact on us. And things like anxiety and depression have become so common. They're costly conditions to us and to the economy. As an example, depression is the leading cause of disability in the world. And anxiety is also extremely costly. And things are sort of moving at a speed that all of us have been on information overload for a while now. The digital age that we're looking at is responsible for a large part of this transformation, right? We're inundated 24/7 with news media, social media, and that sort of increases our sense of stress. And so that's, obviously going on. I mentioned that school shootings have been on the rise, which I imagine for school administrators and personnel and students and teachers is extraordinarily stressful. So that is a graph that just shows you how much it's increased, coming up to 2020, but obviously you guys know better than I do that impact. So that's another stress. Now comes to COVID-19, and a lot has happened in the last 6 months, right? And maybe it's more now, right? We haven't seen this kind of a pandemic since 1918 with the Spanish flu. We're having economic downturns the way we did in the 20s, right? And then, of course, the added racist killings of George Floyd and all that going on, right? There are sort of some of that sort of clashes and protests, since the 1960s, perhaps, So it's a lot of unprecedented things that are happening this year and has potentially serious consequences for our well-being. And our prehistoric brains, and that's what I want to emphasize, are very well equipped for acute danger and threat. They're simply not built for this kind of relentless, persistent threat that we've been experiencing for a while, and especially this year. So our emotions, the way we feel, our thoughts, our behaviors, they're really being triggered 24/7 and way beyond the purpose that they were, evolved for. So our old brains can't keep up with this unremitting, ceaseless threat that we've been experiencing. So you guys can jump in if this is incorrect, but if I'm looking at the pre-COVID context for administrators, there's lots of things you guys face, right? Making strategic decisions, recruiting staff, disciplining students, absenteeism, retention of staff, managing sort of different needs of different constituents, teachers, students, families, meeting students' mental health needs, addressing, employees, supporting special ed, stress related to student outcomes, costs of maintenance and operations, staying up to date with technology, reworking the curriculum, and then managing your work-life balance, right? That's already a lot on your plate. So if you look at the COVID-19 context, right, it brings up a lot in terms of equity of student learning, right? interrupted learning, gaps in learning, lots of gaps all around. Students maybe not being as engaged. Is there that much resources for online hybrid learning? Teachers are under stress, teacher training and support, for tech use. And so there is a whole list of things that are going on, safety of your teachers and students, shortages, accommodating to students, accommodating to teachers, accommodating all around, right? Morale of all constituents can be affected. And the thing is that as administrators, you're also handling everybody else's stress. Certainly as an administrator, in many of my roles, I feel that way as well, that, you become often the receptacle for the stress that other people feel. So that is the context that we're facing. And of course, please feel free to interrupt me at any point. If you want to add something, you want to have a question or clarification, just feel free, and then Bill can tell me if I'm not seeing somebody, right? So now let's take a look at what are the consequences of this context that we're facing. We're here to talk about stress, right? Stress is that feeling of emotional and physical tension that we feel. And it's really our minds and bodies' way of reacting to a change, generally a challenge or demand, and it affects everybody, right? Everyone experiences stress from time to time. And there are different types of stress, all of which carry physical and mental health risks. And it could be a one-time stressor or a short-term occurrence, right? Or it can happen for a long time. And some people may cope with stress more effectively and recover more quickly than others. And it could be, routine stress related to pressures of school, work, family, other responsibilities. It could be stress brought about by a sudden negative change, such as losing a job or a divorce or illness. Then there are traumatic stresses, right? Experienced during a major accident or war or assault or natural disaster where people are maybe in danger of getting seriously hurt or killed. And so, that also, it creates its own degree of stress. So what we're facing today is sort of like a combination of all of that, right? It's a negative event, but it's sort of persisting, as I mentioned, that where we are, there is a danger to our lives. And so obviously it varies by risk group, but that's a feeling that I think has been quite high for all of us this year. So I thought we could take a step back, and look and see what is stress, right? Why do we have it? What function does it serve? So as I mentioned, short-term stress is normal. It can be positive. So emotions, just stepping back for a bit, what are emotions, right? They are inbuilt alarms that we have in our system. They help us survive, all right? The whole idea of evolution is that you are, basically helping your descendants survive, right? So emotions are there to help us survive, help pass on our genes and so on. So what kinds of emotions? So let's talk about anxiety. Anxiety is an alarm for imminent danger. So when we feel anxious, think of it as an alarm that's going off, that's warning you of some danger. And what it does is actually helps us get out of danger. So if you take a look at the short term, right, it motivates us to avoid danger and achieve goals. So biologically, we call it the fight-flight response. There are freeze, faint options, right? But the idea is that anxiety is normal. It's there. It's very protective. And so it helps us get out of danger. So if you look at what our ancestors faced or physical dangers, sometimes we might experience in the past, right? So if you take a look from, being in the jungle and a tiger comes, right? That anxiety comes to our brain and it releases these chemicals and helps us flee or fight and get out of danger. Basically, anxiety is protective, right? And so when it's long-term, right? That's when I mentioned that it can be harmful because it sort of evolved beyond what it was used for, right? To face that kind of danger. So not all stress is bad, of course. So it helps you avoid danger, meet a deadline, right? You worry about a test, you study, and that's what allows you to pass the test. So in a dangerous situation, the stress sort of signals to your body to prepare for that threat, to flee or fight it. And then at these situations, your pulse quickens, you breathe faster, your muscles tense, your brain uses far more oxygen than before, right? And increases your activity. And all of that is aimed at surviving. And that's that response to stress. So in non-life-threatening situations, stress can motivate people, such as like as I mentioned, taking a test or interviewing for a new job. But the long-term stress is what we want to look at now, and that can be harmful. So I mentioned that our old brains can't keep up with this unremitting, ceaseless threat that we've been experiencing for a while, right? Especially this year. And coping with this impact of chronic stress can be challenging because the source of this long-term stress is more constant than that acute stress, right? So in acute stress, your body has a sort of adrenergic system that kicks in. It creates all these symptoms, helps you survive. Then you have the parasympathetic nervous system, or what we call the relaxation response. It kicks in and it brings us back to normal functioning. With chronic stress, right, those same life-saving reactions in the body can disturb our immune system. It can make us like be more vulnerable to colds and flus and things like that, right? It can affect your digestion, it can affect your reproductive system. Some people might have sort of headaches, sleeplessness, lots of things. So the point is that this sort of relentless threat that doesn't sort of revert back to normal can create a strain on our bodies from stress and can lead to health problems, even medical health problems like high blood pressure and things like that. And of course, mental disorders and conditions, depression, anxiety, and so on. So, and the thing about today is that, all of us are going through this, right? So we're on simultaneous overdrive and underdrive. So, everybody, if you've experienced your increase in anxiety and sadness this year, that means that your emotion system is really working as it should, because our fear and our reactions are completely legitimate. COVID is a threat to us and should provoke fear. Our lifestyle changes are depressing, right? We can't go out as much, see our friends, family. So that's depressing. And so it's sort of like that anxiety about COVID, and yet the underdrive, where we're kind of not as active as we used to be. But the way we react to these circumstances can make things worse or better. So there are ways in which we can lessen the negative intensity of these experiences. We just need to turn the dial down a bit so that what we are experiencing today is more manageable. And although many of us will go back to normal when things calm down, it's just important to remember that chronic stress that we're feeling right now is not good for us. So that's why sort of looking at that potential health and mental health impact of chronic fear, the losses, social isolation, significant disruption to our daily lives, are just making us more vulnerable to stress. If you look at some COVID-19 statistics, over half of Americans, and this was back in April, so you can imagine how much it's increased, said that the pandemic had a serious impact on their mental health. 31% of Americans say they're sleeping less because of the virus, right? Related anxiety. And certainly we have seen, and I think all across there, remote therapy services have seen an increase in demand. In terms of school closures, interruptions for the mental health effects, right? Everybody's under stress in a school setting, right? And we know this because CBC is in, over 75, 80 schools, right? We are in so many schools, so we see it just ourselves. Teachers, health professionals, administrators, everybody's experiencing heightened stress. And if you look at students, right? Of course, they're experiencing stress, but those that have mental health needs, it makes their conditions worse. So 83% have said that their pandemic has made their conditions worse. A quarter say that they can't access mental health support, which is what makes us very grateful that we can help in schools for those students. And then, peer support groups, face-to-face services have been canceled, right? So, and also that support by phone or online is challenging for so many people. And many students are experiencing a range of symptoms, appetite, anxiety, sleep, just like all of us. So coming back to school was also distressing. Not being at school was distressing, and it's distressing for all factor people involved. So a range of symptoms may arise, right? There's stress, anxiety, depending on what you face. You might be actually having some post-traumatic stress, sadness, depression, other negative emotions like shame and guilt, anger. Other symptoms, you might be experiencing grief, bereavement. You might have lost someone to COVID. You might just be grieving your own lifestyle change. You might be experiencing compassion fatigue, taking care of people around you, right? Teachers, students, feeling that you're there as a caregiver for others. So this stress, all these symptoms, like how can these symptoms impact you if you have these kind of symptoms? In many ways, right? You might perform less effectively at work, right? It might be disrupting your performance. You may not be as effective. Your cognitive load might be too high right now. You're not as much able to pay attention, or other disruptions at work. It might be disrupting relationships. Maybe there's more conflict between you and coworkers or your partner or your children, or lots of disruptions like that. You may be sleeping as poorly, and then disruptions in eating and weight. You might be losing weight, gaining weight, eating too much. And then increased use of substances to cope with this level of stress. And so what we also want to look at, for when you look at chronic stress, we talk about it in the form of burnout, right? That basically means that it's affecting you so much that you feel burnt out. So you've heard this phrase before, like, what does that mean, right? It could be many, many different signs of it. You might be sleeping later than normal. You might be staying up late. You might have dropped a lot of self-care, exercise, eating in a balanced way. Maybe you're showing up late, not showing up to commitments, or things like that, like not maybe less tolerance for your colleagues, the parents, your partner, children, whoever, right? Maybe there's some avoidance, procrastinating on something that maybe you weren't doing. So this is not a comprehensive list, right? There's so many options that you may have. So let's take a look at burnout and then where we really want to be. So how you think of burnout is, and I want you to think about and self-reflect, and we'll be doing that a little bit, as we go along. Like, it really is that sort of sense of emotional exhaustion and feeling like just less effective at work. You might be feeling powerless, not feeling appreciated. And I mentioned compassion fatigue, right? So on the left side of this slide, right, is where we might be, and then the right side of the slide is where it would be ideally for us to be. So in compassion fatigue, you might feel so spent, feeling like you're caring for others and not being able to sort of get your reserves up. You might be having some own trauma or vicarious trauma, like you might be hearing about other people who've gone through trauma and feeling that sort of vicarious trauma. And then what we want to be is sort of feeling satisfied with compassion, right? Feeling the goal is to feel positive about feeling competent, feeling like you have positive relationships with coworkers, feeling like your work is meaningful, you're making a contribution, right? As school personnel, you are, doing God's work, right? You are helping so many people, so feeling like you're making a meaningful contribution. And feeling like you can work towards being resilient, that you are witnessing other people's stress and trauma, but you can remain resilient. And it's not easy to be there, but this is our goal. So what makes you good at your job? Like, think about it, right? What in general, so if you're not talking about burnout, right, think about what makes you good at your job in general. And that has not changed, right? You are still the same person, even if you're under stress and you're less effective right now, or feeling less effective, or feeling stressed out or burnt out. And there may be a lot that you're struggling with. You might be struggling to manage work and personal demands, all these, there's teacher burnout too. So this is just a slide showing you how burnt out teachers are, right? All these things are happening. And then you add to that being, if you're an administrator, there's different kinds of stresses, all feeling like you're coming, and then your work and home life are colliding. So that way it's, like I texted my daughter and said, please, can you make sure that the phone rings, like you pick it up, or, somebody comes in. It's so hard to manage the work-life balance here. So this is, a burnout is that sort of sense of feeling kind of like spent, you know. So what I'll do to sort of help thinking about what you're experiencing is important. Um, so we'll break it down into sort of three categories of how you might be feeling. One is just the feelings, right? So just the emotions, and emotions have two components. One is the subjective feeling that you have, like I'm feeling anxious or I'm feeling angry. And then there are physical symptoms that are associated with it. I mentioned that under acute moments, those physical symptoms can be helpful in getting us, in the case of anxiety, to run, to fight, and so on. But if they're there, if you're chronically stressed, then that physical tension just remains. You might be feeling muscle tension, getting headaches. You might be grinding your teeth. You might be clenching your jaw. You might be feeling restless and feeling like you need to move around, feeling keyed up. Sleep disturbances are very common when you're anxious, when you're angry, when you're sad, whether it's difficulty falling asleep, difficulty staying asleep, waking up too early, or even if you do sleep, feeling like you're not feeling rested. You can feel tired, easily. And then I mentioned the cognitive load. So it makes sense when you're under acute stress that you have difficulty concentrating on other things. So let's say you're facing a tiger and doesn't matter whether you have, attending to other things in your environment. But if you're chronically stressed and you're constantly thinking of the danger, you can't attend to so many things. It's hard really to concentrate. Or feeling slowed down if you're sort of feeling sad and not as activated. So all these are in the category of feelings. So the subjective experience of it, plus the physical things that you might be experiencing. So think about that for a minute. That's one category, right? Feelings. So the second category is, what are you doing that may not be helpful? Like what's going on? Like all of us don't have as much structure and routine as we did before, right? You get up and you're, at work, and you might be having poor sleep hygiene. You might be staying up late, general self-care might be affected. You might be suppressing your negative feelings and thoughts. Like when you feel anxious or angry or sad, you might be trying to stop it, not allowing these natural emotions to come and go. You might find that you are spending time ruminating. Now that sounds like it's in your head, but we call it a behavior because it's the way that you're using to cope. These are all behaviors, right, and actions. Other unhelpful behaviors, right? We're doing a lot less positive activities, right? That give us positive rewards. Can you hang on just a second? Somebody just opened the door. Sorry about that. Talking about work-life colliding here. We're doing fewer activities that give us positive rewards now, maybe going to a movie or hiking, more activities that are punishing, more like being on Zoom all day, right? And maybe, like I mentioned, more activities that help us escape from stress, like, like substances, excessive use of substances to feel better. And not facing the stressful situations that we might be avoiding certain things that we need to do, don't feel like doing it. Or we may be paying selective attention to stressful things like reading the news all day or being on TV, and sort of that's not helping your stress. So these are the category of behaviors that you might be doing. The third category is thoughts. And that is, what are thoughts that you might be having that are just not helping you, meaning helpful in that it's making you more stressed out, right? So when you kind of are in that cycle of predicting that, oh my God, bad things are going to happen, right? I'm definitely going to get COVID and I'm going to die, right? It's sort of assuming negative things, like we call, and if it's really bad, sort of very extreme thinking, we call it catastrophic thinking, like, you know, we're never going to get out of this, right? And then even safe events feel like dangerous. Maybe I can't ever go outside at all. Um, and then when you have this sort of kind of thinking where you think, God, this is never going to end, like this constant sense of ongoing threat or hopelessness, like, wow, it's this virus will never go away, this economy will never recover, right? That sort of sense of feeling that is constant and feeling like these negative things that are happening to us is permanent. The world will never be the same again. And then thinking like, I don't think I'm capable of handling it. The more you think bad things are going to happen, the more you think they'll always continue, the more you think I can't handle it, the more likely you are to be stressed. And so that's an example of an unhelpful thinking, right? Um, and so we also know that when you have very negative, very inflexible ways of thinking, very extreme. So think of it as sort of when you find, if you find yourself saying extreme things, right? One or the other, and it doesn't seem to be changing about something that's going on or the consequences of it, or about other people, or about yourself, or the world has gone to hell, you know, in a handbasket, and you know, my colleagues are just not, they're just like this, or some, you know, or oh my God, I'm such a loser, or like when you say things like that, right? But there's judgments of the extreme thoughts, and they take the form of judgment. So what we know from research is that if you judge yourself or you judge others on things that you may be doing, my God, I'm so a loser, I can't believe how much I'm drinking, right? It actually affects your stress. But the interesting thing is, even if you judge actions taken by others or other people's reactions, it also creates stress for you, which is interesting, isn't it? So the more you have judgments of your other people on what they're doing or how they're reacting, right? The more you feel more stressed out, right? And so, and there, those extreme thoughts I mentioned, the more you think of it as it's wide and sweeping consequences, right? This will never be the same again, or that person completely is awful, right? So there's that sense of either it's this or that, right? Very extreme absolutist thinking that really creates stress for us. Okay, so and there may be many things that you may be having, and this is like what we would call your inner dialogue. It's hard. This is the hardest to really notice. It's easier to think, how am I feeling, right? From an evolutionary perspective, it makes sense, right? If you attend to your anxiety, I'm like, I don't want that lion to eat me, right? So it's helpful to pay attention to it. You kind of notice what you're doing. This is really hard because it makes it you have to become an observer of the way you're thinking, which is not easy to do because it's like a self-dialogue. Like think of it as a cartoon, that cartoon bubble over your head, right? What is in it? And the more that we have these kinds of thoughts, it increases our stress. So I would say that what I'm going to do is I am going to, where's the chat function here? I'm going to send out a file. Okay, let me know if you guys get it. And if you can open it up on your computer, and if you can't take a piece of paper, you know, let me know if you're able to open it up, or if not, or if you're not able to, then just take a pad of paper. And I hope that you will engage in this so that it is helpful. So let's start assessing it, right? I want you to take a moment to think, what is the highest source of stress? What is going on today for me? The source of stress. So we'll talk about how you're feeling and what you're thinking and what you're doing. But at this moment, I want you to think there might be many things and it may be hard to choose. but think like out of everything going on, like what is creating the most stress for me today? That's the most useful. It may not be the stress for you next week, but what is creating the stress right now is the most helpful. Certainly it could be that, just getting COVID, right? Or it could be some particular problem that you're having at school or with your partner or child, whatever it is, right? What is the source of stress, right? There's this thing that's going on that's really stressing me out. So if you take that sheet, just write it down. So I'll give you a few minutes to do that. And if you have questions, I'm happy to take it.
So hard to choose just one source.
It is, and it's, if you want to put down others, you could, but it'd be great to focus on one because it's more helpful when you're thinking about one. Otherwise, it becomes a very general exercise,
Right.
If you want to write down others, then you could do this exercise with those things later, with other times. So if we go along to if you've done that already, let me know if you need more time. But the next few lines, you'll see, how am I reacting to this source of stress, right? And those are the three categories I mentioned, right? So in the first one, or in the list, of course, the second one that says, what negative feelings and symptoms am I experiencing? Put down the subjective feelings. I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling sad or angry or guilty or ashamed or whatever it is, right? I'm feeling, and then any physical symptoms that you might be experiencing, right? So this is not something you're going to share with people, so you can be as open as you want. This is your exercise, right? And so what physical symptoms am I experiencing? Am I having tension headaches? So this requires a little bit of self-reflection, right? Am I grinding my teeth, right? Am I having headaches? Right? Do I feel like I have butterflies in my stomach, or what is, what are physical sensations? Am I not sleeping well, right? What are physical things that I'm experiencing? And the one after that is, what actions or behaviors am I engaging in that, of course, is your subjective judgment, that's not helpful. So we covered some of those behaviors, and I'm happy to go back to those slides if you guys would like. But that way you're thinking of what the unhelpful things that you might be doing, like I'm not exercising, or I'm not sleeping well, or I'm avoiding doing this project, or I lost my temper at so and so, or whatever it is, right? Whatever, again, without judgment. This is not a place for judgment. This is what you think, and with the way to think about it is it helpful or ineffective? And there could be many. So just put down your best. When I say best, I mean, don't think that you have to think of everything you're doing, but whatever actions that you can think of in this moment, do that. The third is the thinking, right? So what are ineffective, unhelpful thoughts that are bothering me a lot? Like, what do I find myself thinking about a lot, right? Whether could be COVID related, right? I'm gonna get COVID and die, or we'll never be able to go out again to concerts, or oh my goodness, this person will never react this way, or whatever it is, or this person is so awful, like whatever you find yourself saying a lot. It could be a judgment of yourself, it could be a judgment of others, it could be some prediction you're making about something. It's in some ways, the way you want to think about this part is that it's an interpretation. Well, it's your interpretation of things that are going on. This is a source of stress I'm having, and that person is at fault because of it, or I'm this way, or that nothing will ever change, or some kind of interpretation you're making. I'll never get over this, or I'll never be the same again, or I'm not strong enough to cope, or anything that you find yourself saying that sort of stresses you out, right? And the reason we're kind of dividing it up like this is because we know that when the subjective feelings you have and the physical symptoms, and the behaviors and the thoughts sort of fuel each other, and one makes the other worse. So the more you think a certain way, the more you feel that way. The more you feel a certain way, the more likely you are to behave in a certain way. So what we want to do in sort of breaking it down and separating them is to break that cycle for us. So whatever it is that you're feeling, like, oh my God, I'm working too much and I'm gonna have a nervous breakdown, or, I'm the telehealth is gonna be the death of me, right? Or, supporting, I can't support anymore. I can't handle it, or, oh my God, so much housework, right? I'm gonna lose it, or whatever it is that you're saying to yourself. Now, the interesting thing about these kinds of ways of thinking is that because it's sort of our inner dialogue, we kind of just believe it. So that's something to keep in mind. But it doesn't matter whether when you leave that moment, you don't believe it. Put down whatever you find yourself doing, whatever you find yourself saying that you think is not helpful. So again, I'll give you a few minutes. And if you have any questions that you're filling it out, please tell me. And pay particular mind to sort of extreme, sort of inflexible sort of things that you might be saying, or if they're catastrophic, or things that you are predicting that seem kind of like wide sweeping statements that you might be making. It's sort of instinctive. It's not something you want to think, but it just happens. So think of it as, what are unhelpful things that just automatically come to your head? It's not like you're trying. So when I said something like judgments of others or judgments of yourself, it doesn't mean that's you might not want to do it, but it might be happening, right? So it's okay to just put it down. Like, what am I actually saying to myself or saying in my head? So if you remember, we talked about the talk is separated into 3 sections, right? So one was the context we talked about. All this time we've been talking about consequences, like what is the source of stress? What am I feeling? What am I thinking? What am I doing? And how that affects us. So the 3rd section is what to do about it, right? So how can we cope? And these come from, we call them cognitive and behavioral skills, just fancy way of saying thoughts and actions, right? To achieve wellness. So cognitive behavioral skills to achieve sort of wellness. There are lots of ways to manage stress. And so the goal is to come up with some practical ways to sort of help that stress so that it reduces the risk of the negative effects. It doesn't mean that, oh, pandemic is going to go away because we did this exercise. It just means, how can I help a little bit so that that persistent, ceaseless threat and sort of stress that we feel is just less. And so part of it is just what we're doing right now. We're observing it, right? So recognizing, what am I feeling? What am I thinking? What am I doing? And what is stressing me out, right? That is helpful, because that means you're not just sort of in a zone, you're actually thinking about it. So that in itself is a helpful exercise. And, why is your self-care important, right? When you go on a plane, you see you got to put on a mask here, right? Oxygen mask before you help the people that you are being a caregiver to. And that's really, really important. And schools have become the de facto mental health system for many children and adolescents, right? So if you guys are providing a lot of mental health services to children who need care, it's become a primary source of community for youth, right? We know that COVID-19 is affecting academic, social achievement, right? So we know that there are lots of things going on, but your own self-care is important, because then you will be more effective at taking care of the people around you, whatever your role is. And so that is something I want to stress, because if you're not doing well, then others are not going to do as well. So I mentioned that we break it down into these 3 categories because of that, right? That thoughts can lead to feelings, feelings can lead to behaviors, behaviors can lead to thoughts. If I think this is never going to go away, I can feel, sort of sad, and then I might just withdraw and not get out of bed, right? And then if I don't get out of bed, I then have more hopeless thoughts, right? And so it can become a cycle. So part of this exercise is to how to break that cycle and modify how you're feeling and reduce that sense of chronic stress. So what I've come up with is an acronym that will perhaps help you, right? We're going to call that ADAPT, right? And this ADAPT acronym is really what's on the rest of your worksheet. And that's a way to cope. And again, it uses cognitive and behavioral skills. These ADAPT skills that we're going to go over for the rest of the time are skills to manage stress. So we'll go over each one, but A, accept how I feel. D is dial it down. A is actions that I can take to combat stress, right? So that's the behaviors we've been talking about. Physical exercises to ease my tension. So that helps the feeling, the subjective feeling and the physical tension we talked about. And then the thoughts. So then these are helpful thoughts to combat stress. So it's time for us to adapt, and I'm going to go over each one. And so the first is, why should I accept how I feel, right? I talked about our prehistoric brain, right? Saying to yourself, my prehistoric brain is helping me, right? I think I'm in danger or I am experiencing a loss. We know that, for example, sadness is a reaction to loss. If you lost someone or lost just your sense of self or lost your usual self who goes out, right? That's makes you sad. And all these emotions have a function. The function is to protect you and help you survive. So that always helps me, like say that emotions are an alarm, right? They're there to protect me. Anxiety is here to help me survive this pandemic. Fear and anxiety is a reaction to danger. It's normal for me to be anxious. People can die from COVID, right? And it's the fear that has led me to wash my hands and avoid others because my brain is trying to get me out of danger, right? I'm cleaning and disinfecting because my brain is trying to protect me. I'm hypervigilant to, ambulance sirens because it's important for me to be alert, have cues that remind me to protect myself. And I may not be sleeping as deeply or as long because my brain wants to make sure that there's no danger lurking, So it's important to understand what an emotion is. It's just an alarm, right? It's just an alarm, like the fire alarm. It's not the fire, it's the fire alarm. So recognizing what the purpose is of emotions really helps me. And I'm hoping it helps you. So that helps me empathize and validate my suffering as real without judgment. So it's not like, why am I so anxious, right? It's natural to be anxious, right? This is there. That's one, right? So except helping, saying to yourself that your prehistoric brain is helping you. And also we know from research that if you have a painful feeling or a thought, if you try to stop it, it actually doesn't work. It sort of bounces back more strongly. So we know that trying not to feel something or think something is not going to be helpful. So that's why accepting it is important. So accepting how I feel, right? That these feelings, I may not be great. I may not like feeling this way. The fire alarm is not pleasant when it goes off, right? It's alarm. It's like kind of annoying. It goes on and on and on. But it may not be pleasant, but it's helpful to me. And it's helping me survive. So that's something, fear is a normal reaction to danger. Trying to stop these feelings is not helpful. It's just trying to get me out of danger. Sadness is a normal reaction to loss, and it's helping me deal with loss. It's okay to feel sad. So many lives have been lost. People are losing jobs. I've lost the sense of myself that's able to go out, navigate the world, right? I've lost predictability and stability in the world, right? So understanding that it's normal and this is just trying to help you helps you empathize with yourself, right? So that's one, that's accept. That's the A part of adapt. So now write down what you can say, and I can go back to that slide, but I want you to take that worksheet now and say something. It doesn't have to be long, elaborate, just say one statement or state to yourself that you can say to accept what you're going through. And what I mean is just accepting, how you feel. It's accepting that this is there, it's evolutionary perspective, it's there to help you, and trying to stop it is just going to make it worse, right? So saying something and say it in the form of a first person present tense dialogue. This is a conversation by you to yourself. So you are helping yourself. So say it in the I, say it in the present, right? Say something that you're telling yourself, you're helping yourself. And remember, this is just an exercise for you. Nobody has to see it. So you can say what you want with complete openness. And no judgment, right? And be as specific as you can be. I've been feeling angry, it's whatever the source of stress that you mentioned, it's anger is an alarm, right? It's telling me something. I'm sensing anger as a reaction to feeling threatened in some way yourself. Feeling guilty if you feel like you've done something wrong, right? You feel guilty, and all of it is a helpful alarm, no matter what the emotion is. It's there because your prehistoric brain is trying to help you, and that's the bottom line, right? So it's even if it's not feeling good or affecting your stress, it's still there to help you. So I statements, present tense. And the second part of adapt is to dial it down, right? But that's what we're looking for. We're looking for, so in the case of COVID, like I'm not in immediate danger right now, right? COVID is not a tiger that's going to eat me today, right now, right? So it's sort of distancing it a little bit. That's one. And then saying this is going to go on for a while, right? So there are two reasons. One is I'm not immediately today, I'm in this workshop, I'm not immediately in danger in the case of anxiety, right? It's going to go on. Also, it's going to go on for a while. So I can't be in sustained stress. And because that's why I need to calm my body, I need to calm my brain, I need to calm my behaviors. So that takes you back to those three things that you filled out, right? Your actions, your behaviors, your thinking, that's in your brain, and then your body, right? Your subjective feelings and your attention. So that's why we need to dial it down. That's all we're looking for right now. So using this as a guide, the fact that you're not in immediate, whatever it is, right? In the case of anxiety, danger, and recognizing that whatever you're feeling may be going on for a while, right? Say something to yourself. So what can you say to yourself? Fill out the next sentence. What can you say to yourself just to dial it down right now? And again, talk to yourself in the first person and in the present tense. So now let's talk about actions, right? So now again, we're the last part of adapt is the three things that you filled out. What am I doing? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? So this is now the actions, right? So what actions can I take? Can I maintain some structure? Can I do my regular ritual, like getting ready in the morning, putting on my clothes, or putting your contacts on, or whatever it is, or just doing some kind of ritual or something to create stability. We know that stress thrives on unpredictability and uncertainty. So rituals in general, like obviously in the case of people who have things like OCD, the rituals become unhelpful, right? Because they're too much. But some degree of rituals are actually helpful. And that's why people do it, right? To calm yourself. So you think of religious rituals, right? There's a sense of repeating something. So even if it's like a daily routine, doing something to reestablish routines, engaging in your familiar rituals, maybe working on your sleep or protecting, yourself from doing something like, are you doing all the safety precautions you're doing? Or you're watching too much TV, right? Are you doing some negative habits that are not helpful, right? So basically, if you're feeling a certain way all the time, it means that you need to pay attention to that fire alarm, right? So that's why taking these actions will turn off that fire alarm ultimately. So one of the things that really helped me, for example, was restricting where I work in the house. In CBT, that is called stimulus control. It's a fancy word for saying if you're trying to kind of not like in this case, I'll give you an example so it's clearer. I found that when I first started with COVID, I was working from home, that I just couldn't sit still in one place. So I was working in my study, I was working in the kitchen, I was working in my living room, I was working on my bed, I was working on the dining room. So what happens then is that every part of my house became associated with work. So stimulus control means that you restrict where you are so your mind doesn't, and this is like a learning conditioning, right? Your mind starts associating those things with work. It works also like, let's say you're eating too much or drinking too much or whatever habit you're doing, you're trying to reduce it, right? It helps to at least contain where you're doing it. So that way, if I'm eating in every room in my house, what happens is then every room in the house reminds me of food. So if I only eat in the kitchen or only eat in the dining room, then I only think of food then. That just makes it easier for me. So that was really extraordinarily helpful for me to do. So that's something that you might consider as an action that you want to take. What are the actions? And it can be very simple, right? You might clean out a drawer one day. You might set up a space that's comfortable for you. Maybe you haven't taken the time to make a space for yourself that's comfortable in your office, right? Maybe the chair is uncomfortable and you haven't been sitting for so long. Like maybe you need some other kind of chair. Maybe you need some back support. Maybe you're not taking breaks, right? Maybe you're just going back to back to back to back. Maybe you're not doing things that are enjoyable at all. Or maybe you're not doing nothing that makes you feel accomplished, right? Or observe your limits, right? Maybe the hours of the day I'm working or anything, or the noise that the location, anything. So anything that you can do, think of it as, and don't think of it as this huge thing that you have to do, right? Think of it as, what little action can I take? Because what happens is if you start saying, I am never going to eat, dessert again, right? You're not going to do it. No point saying it to yourself. Just pick something that's actually doable. What action can I take that could reduce my stress a bit? There might be other actions, right? You might not be, you're kind of at work. What's happening is that there are people who may not be, let's say, responding to you. Maybe you're getting angry, so you may be doing something like getting upset at somebody. So then saying, okay, maybe I need to do something. Maybe what I need to work on is not never being angry, but maybe being a little less, or and think of it as you're just shaping your behavior. Don't expect the world. It's managing expectations for yourself and for others, and that just helps over time. It can increase. We know that behaviors, when you engage in them, feelings follow after that. So if you feel sad and then you do something that makes you less sad, then you feel less sad. If you wait to feel less sad to do it, then you actually never feel less sad. So recognizing that this is hard for you to do, it's hard for other people, but you're taking some little action today, right now. And so it's just a foot in the door for yourself. What is it that I want to do? I just want to do a little bit right now. So if we look at that, I look at a couple of emotions in more detail in terms of what behaviors that are unhelpful, right? We talked about. Now we're talking about helpful behavior. So what is helpful for sadness? I talked about the fact that sadness comes when you have a loss, right? And the thought you have is that you've lost something. So the way to cope with it is what the alarm is telling you to do, in other words, is on the one hand to rest. The other is to restore yourself, but it's moderation. So it may be that you're going 90 miles an hour and you need some rest, some solitude for yourself. Certainly eating and sleeping well, some time to be on your own, Zoom-free days, maybe to overcome your state of depletion. And then in addition, so on the one hand, you are resting. So think about, when you think of the function of sadness, the thing you think of first is, bereavement. So if someone has lost a person, right, you go through that feeling of mourning, and that is necessary. That's the way of your body healing yourself. So if you need to have some rest and solitude so that your body can heal from the sadness, that's on the one side. That's the rest. The other part is restore, right? Which is now I need to go back. So let's say if you've lost someone, whether it's a relationship or whether it's, a person that has passed away, that alarm continues. Let's say you're resting and you're healing there, but that sadness continues. What is the function of that alarm? What it's doing is telling you to reconnect with people, right? So unless you do, it's going to continue. So finding activities that create some connection with others, even if it's helping others, we know that helping others actually is antidepressant. And then we know from research that the more you do activities that create pleasure and mastery, like think of it like an activity diet. If you're doing only activities that create like a sense of accomplishment and mastery, but no pleasure and not connecting with others at all, that's not good. Just like you need a plate of food where you need your, protein and carbs, etc., you need a little bit of everything. So you need some activity that create, maybe you're not doing anything that creates pleasure. Maybe you're doing only things that create pleasure, right? And maybe you're never alone, or you're always with people, or never seeing anybody, yeah, even if it's a phone call or whatever it is. So anything extreme right now. So think of, so when you're doing sadness, right, you're trying to help yourself. On the one hand, you're resting. On the other hand, you're engaging in activities that create pleasure, that create mastery, that create connection. And if it helps others, that's actually great. And the sense of feeling like you need to be with others depends on you, right? Depends on your temperament too. People who are introverted need less of that. People who are extroverted may need more of that. So it depends on you, but it's some kind of balance. So if you're only by yourself all the time, that's not good. So think about it as a moderate, can I keep a journal, or, I do some sports or exercise or reading or TV or anything that you can think of, but that's specific. The second emotion I'll go over is for behavior is anxiety. So in general, when I mentioned that when you're in danger and anxiety hits you, the natural reaction is fight, flight, right? So it's good to avoid, that's what we're doing. We're home, right? We're avoiding, and that's good because we're in danger. So some degree of avoidance, escape, and rituals are good, right? I need to wash my hands for 20 seconds. I need to wear a mask. I need to eat, things like that. Okay, I need to maintain some physical distancing. So some degree of that physical distancing is important. Some degree of the cleaning rituals is important. And I need to stay informed. And on the one hand, like I need to make sure I know what's going on in the world, but I don't need to hear it 24/7. Right? I don't need to have my phone in my room, right? We know that if you put your smartphone in your room and you're asleep, and I'm guilty of that, right? You're not going to sleep as well. If you have lights going on now, it's very hard to find a room that doesn't have some digital light somewhere. Your air conditioning, the alarm or whatever it is, any kind of that could affect you. So you don't need to wash your vegetables with soap or Clorox your entire house, or you just need to do something that's moderate. So some kind of fight flight you need to do to manage it. So some kind of action. So if you feel you're overdoing something, put that down as a goal. So what I'd like you to do now is, based on what we covered, is write down what actions can you take today to combat your stress. Again, don't give yourself huge things to do, because you're not going to do them. Because if you're having some bad habits, right, or things that are creating stress, it's not just going to go away. So be moderate, and then you can over time increase it. So stick with what you think is doable, and think of it, you are fallible, right? So you're not going to, do everything you want to do. So it's important that you come up with actions. It could be just something small, like I mentioned, like getting ready in the morning and putting on your contacts, or putting on your clothes like you would if you go to work, or just smiling at somebody when you see them, even though they're making you mad, or any little thing that you think you can do. Only eating in this place versus that place, or you're not resting enough, or you're whatever it is. So take time and just write it down now. And the other is now the second part. So that's your, you come up to P now. So adapt, right? Accept how I feel, dial it down, right? And then actions you're taking. So that's what we've been talking about. And the other is, what can you do right now that's going to ease your tension a bit physically? What physical thing can you do? Now, when we teach relaxation skills, we focus on what we call breathing skills, right? They're called diaphragmatic breathing skills. We teach muscle relaxation exercises, and that's because, and then we teach people how to apply those relaxation exercises. So what I'll do is actually go over the diaphragmatic breathing, right? It takes work to retain your breathing. So what we do when we teach people is that you learn the kind of breathing you're doing, which is shallow. When you're stressed out, you tend to do more shallow breathing. That kind of breathing is really helpful when you're trying to get out of danger, right? It helps you get more oxygen, helps you run. But if it's all the time, it sort of creates that sense of stress that you feel. So we need to slow down our breathing. We need to breathe through our bellies, not our chest. And the more you can think of pleasant imagery as you're doing it, like what is the relaxation place that you associate with relaxation? Maybe it's one day you were at a beach, or it's a thing that you think about, or it's your own bed, or whatever it is, imagining that you're there. And when we teach people these skills, right, then when you finally to heighten that sense of relaxation, there's a meditative component to it. Now, this is a hard skill to actually do, to get to that point. If you do all of this, you feel like a bowl of jello while you're doing it. It's really powerful. And what it does is it sort of rejuvenates you for the rest of the day. And so at that moment you feel, and again, it's not good to do this when you are stressed out, like particularly stressed out, like, oh, I'm feeling stressed right now, I need to practice it. No, pick a less stressful time, because it's hard enough skill to learn. But it's hard to do it when you start learning it when you're heightened stress. So I'm going to just do this. So I'm going to just have you practice a little bit right now, whatever you can do. So I'd like you to just put down your pen for a minute, or put down your computer, and just sit back and relax a bit in your chair. And I'd like you to, if you can, close your eyes. And I'll play this breathing exercise for a minute so you feel a bit relaxed today. Okay, so just lean back, close your eyes. So that's just a minute, so that way, if you do this, for example, 10 minutes in a day, you feel, and you master the activity, it really brings on this enormous sense of relaxation. And what that does, it takes the edge off the rest of the day, Another exercise, which takes a little bit more effort, is called progressive muscle relaxation. And essentially, when we are tense, we don't realize how much we hold that tension. So what it does is it goes through every muscle group you have, and it contrasts tension with relaxation. So it teaches you, oh, this is what tension feels like, because you forget. When you're constantly under tension, it feels normal. So by contrasting it, it helps you discern and figure out, oh, that's tension. Oh, I need to relax. Again, using pleasant imagery. When we teach people, we also help them practice with certain cues in the environment, so that later when you're not in that situation, it can bring about that feeling by recalling it. And then when I talked about applied relaxation, we'll talk about that in a minute. But at this point, when you do this progressive muscle relaxation, you learn how to let go of your feelings, thoughts, and behaviors without force. So you learn as you enhance that exercise to let go of these thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. You can combine it with breathing. You can imagine yourself again in a serene place. And then you're practicing, but this takes a little bit longer, of course. Once you master this exercise, that letting go part, right, of letting go your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, then you learn to apply it every time you notice early tension, stress, anxiety, any early signs of it. And then what happens is the way you do it every time, it helps ease that sustained tension that you feel. These exercises are not to be used to avoid feeling, right? We talked about feelings being helpful. It's there just to reduce that sense of chronic tension that you feel. Now, I recognize that it's hard to learn these exercises, so I've put some apps down for you guys that you might want to do. There's an app called Belly Bio Breathing that can teach you that diaphragmatic breathing. There's an app called Autogenic Training and Muscle Relaxation that can teach you that progressive muscle relaxation. There are lots of apps that do mindfulness. There's an app called Calm that might help you, Headspace. And even exercise, just exercise uses up your adrenaline. So that's also helpful. So if any of these sort of jump out at you, so what I want you to do right now is just write down what physical exercises can I use to ease my tension. Just put down one thing. Don't go overboard. Just one thing. What can I do? What's easy for me to do? What can I make an effort to do? And just write it down on that list. And that's your commitment to yourself to just put it down. This is the hardest part, right? What can I do? What helpful thoughts can I say to myself? What inner dialogue? What is that little cartoon bubble on my head that's saying all these unhelpful things? And what can I say that's helpful? Because we know that when you say something to yourself in your mind, you actually feel that way, right? So can I adjust my risk perception, right? Am I overestimating how bad it will be? We are in danger on the one hand, and yet we know the media inflates risk perception. You know, thanks to evolution, our mind is built to pay attention to threat. And we have a very buggy risk perception in our brain. So, you know, for example, people will text in their car, even though going over the speed limit, we know that's dangerous, so people still do it. And COVID certainly is a danger, so not underestimating that. But the COVID estimation, it's about 200,000, which is obviously terrible and true. But if you put it in context, right, we know that more than 600,000 people will die from heart disease in 2020. But we don't spend our times worrying about that, right? So our risk perception is, and so despite the fact that the risk of heart disease is the #1 killer in the US, most people don't worry about it, right? Otherwise, what would we do? We'd be eating celery sticks, not potato chips, right? So, and so you kind of get by your day because of it. So what can you, so you might say something that reduces your risk perception right now, or saying something that makes you believe that you're capable of coping with, bad things or whatever it is, whatever bad outcome you're predicting. One is reducing it on the one hand, one is increasing your ability to cope with it, right? And that's both are sort of the flip side. What other thoughts can you say, right? Normalize again, back to that accept, right? Normalize it. This is natural. Of course I'm feeling this way, right? And the goal is to take those extreme thoughts and just make them a little less inflexible, a little less negative, a little less extreme. It's interesting that when you say, there's research that shows, as an example, let's say when you're driving and somebody cuts you off, if you say, oh my God, that asshole, right? You feel more stressed out. If you say, even if you just say, wow, I'm so angry at that person, believe it or not, that actually helps how you feel. Or if you think, God, that person is such a narcissist, right? Versus, oh, maybe that person was rushing home to their to relieve their nanny, right? It's just a little bit less extreme, right? You still may be angry, but not as. So if you think, oh my God, I'm going to get COVID and die, right? You're going to get more anxious. But if I'm going to get COVID, likely if I'm not in a risk group, and even if I am, most likely I'm going to be all right because that's what the data show. So it doesn't have to be very less negative, just a little less, just be a little less extreme. And then being non-judgmental is really important. So the more, as I mentioned this earlier, the more that you think benignly of yourself, right? I'm not a loser. I just having a hard time, eating right now, right? Or this person is such an asshole, right? Oh, this person is struggling just like I am, right? The more you foster these benign perceptions of yourself and other people, the better you feel. So the goal is to have some balanced optimism, to enhance. You're not looking for huge things, but some balanced optimism. Things will go back. Think of silver linings. That really helps me, right? I was telling Bill when we started that, what's my silver lining, right? One of it is that I feel so grateful that I can do things like this for people, right? It makes me feel so good that I can help people. Other silver linings for me, right? No commute, more solitude or more time with my children or, connecting with people that I haven't connected with for a while. So what are you grateful for? So kind of having that, and what all these thoughts have in common is they are a little less extreme. They're a little less inflexible. So it's just like ratcheting it down. That's all. So if you think everyone is doing the best they can, I'm doing the best I can, right? That's going to help your stress. So in that thought column, if you can put down at least one thought that you can say to yourself to combat stress. Again, first person present tense. Whatever unhelpful thought that you put down in that sheet, modify that, change it. And what that does is it's really something that you can use periodically. It's not magically going to take away your stress. It's something when you find yourself saying unhelpful thing, it's a quick way of saying something a little less extreme. And that has enormous benefits to how you feel and what you do. It'll make those actions easier. The more helpful actions you take, it'll help your thoughts and your feelings. So put down over there what you can do. So we're coming to the end, and this is your adapt. So keep that acronym that will help you, and over time it'll become more and more automatic. Accepting how I feel, dialing it down, what actions can I take, what physical exercises can I do to ease my tension, what thoughts can I use to combat stress. And that, the acronym is sort of a quick way, it's a mnemonic cue to help you quickly jump into this exercise. All right, so obviously if you want to master any of this and you need more help, you can call us. I'm happy to, that way it's CBC does a lot of this. Bill knows already, but I'm happy to be in touch with you guys if you have any questions or want to learn more of these skills and master them.
Well, that was terrific, Dr. McGinn, and just really helpful for all of us to understand both the sources of our stress and anxiety, and then to get some further insights into how to address those and cope with those, and some really practical ideas and strategies there at the end. We have a couple minutes if there are any questions or comments from those folks who are here in the meeting, or please feel free to unmute yourself and speak up before we wrap up. But I do want to give folks an opportunity to take advantage of the meeting format so that you feel that you have a chance to weigh in. Anyone out there who wants to make a comment or ask a question of Dr. McGinn? As I said, we will make the recording available probably in a couple days or so. But now's a chance when you have Dr. McGinn right here, if there's anyone who's brave enough to speak up.
I'll ask a quick question, or actually, I don't think it is a quick question. There's probably no easy answer, but you talked a lot about how being judgmental of oneself and others has a negative impact on pretty much everything. Do you have any strategies for avoiding making judgments, negative judgments, or it just seems to come very naturally for me? So I would love to.
It is. And so it's just coming up with something a little less judgmental to start off with, right? So let's say if you're saying something that's labeling yourself or labeling others, just even stopping that label, just saying, well, how can I say the same thing, but more descriptively? Right? I'm really angry at that person because they did this, or I'm feeling really mad at myself because I did this. Even that alone, as opposed to, oh my God, I can't believe I'm a loser, right? Any kind of label you attach to, even if you think, what can I say that's a little less judgmental? What can I say? And it really is a matter of writing it down and saying it. It's not just the insight, like I should be less judgmental, because it doesn't work. But if I say, every time I have that judgmental thought of myself, if I replace it with something a little less judgmental, over time it starts to really make a difference, because we don't realize how much this dialogue in our head influences how we feel and what we do. So we start to kind of just buy into that's real. No, it's not real, it's just thought. So if you just say, that's why the basic guideline is something a little less extreme, but it's saying it. It's actually saying it. That's why I had you write it down in your worksheet so that you can, next time you have that thought, say, okay, I have that thought, I'm going to say this. In the beginning, it'll feel just like you go to the gym. It's very hard, right? You're like, oh, I got to do this. It's very hard. But if you keep doing it, then it starts to help, because it's knowing that I have to do it. It's not going to make me, have good muscles or help my aerobic activity. Just the same way, if I do these 3 exercises, right? Some action, some thought, some feeling every day, doesn't matter how small it is, eventually it really starts to add up. And then it becomes more routine as a result.
Thank you. So effort and work, I guess.
Yeah, but be kind to yourself. Just do a little bit, right? Because obviously so much is going on. You can't expect the world of yourself right now. So just expect something small in each category.
Thank you.
Well, such good advice. Well, thank you, Dr. McGinn. We really appreciate your being here with us and sharing your expertise on this very important topic. And so many of the comments in the chat, very positive and appreciative. So we're really, really grateful to you. I just want to thank, again, CAS's corporate partners, the Connecticut Army National Guard, Liberty Bank, Horace Mann, Jostens, and Pullman and Cumley for their support. Want to thank everybody here in the audience, those folks who are still on the call, for attending. I hope this information is helpful and valuable in supporting you and the crucial work that you're doing of educating all of Connecticut's school children. We have lots coming up at CAS. Next week, December 9th at 10 a.m., fun and free distance learning resources for Connecticut principals and teachers with presenters from the Connecticut Education Network and Internet 2. December 16th, 3 p.m., attorneys Tom Mooney and Natalia Sierra Milan from Shipman and Goodwin presenting on free speech in our schools. What are the rules for teachers, principals, and others? Look at our CAS-CIAC.org website for all kinds of information about things that are upcoming. We try to be here for you and make sure you be in touch with us about the resources that we can bring to you. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful end to your day, a great end to your week. Thank you again, Dr. McGinn. Thank you all, and we'll see you next time at CAS. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lizzie, Karen, Bill, everybody.